Welcome to the session, everyone. Today, our second episode, I wanted to talk about the current healthcare model that we experience and I guess ascribe to and look toward for wisdom when we have any kind of health issue, but also not just that, to direct us in the right direction for keeping our health and maintaining it and staying healthy and staying out of the hospitals and out of the doctor's offices and out of the practitioner offices, so that we can be well. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because there are some things that I feel we need to uncover and discuss so that we can make our current healthcare model and the standard of care that we experience in that healthcare model better, more well suited to longevity and prevention. So I hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Family Health Revolution podcast with Coach Carla Atherton, where she discovers, uncovers, explores, and reveals the secrets to true family health and wellness.
All right, so welcome everyone. Again, this is episode 2 of the Family Health Revolution podcast, and today we're talking about our current healthcare model, our standard of care, what we encounter when we enter this whole medical system. But I want to introduce the ideas of, what our medical systems entail and what we learn about health, from the get-go, in throughout our lives. But I want to address that not to criticize our medical system or the standard of care. I mean, there are a lot of flaws, and we're going to be uncovering a lot of things and discussing those things as each episode unfolds as part of what we're talking about. I mean, there's many, many other things that I'd love to share with you. But the intent is not to stay in a headspace of negativity. When we encountered so many rocky roads and big mountains to climb and just outright hostility toward our family, when we were looking for answers, and we're still looking for answers for certain things and still advocating and still all that stuff that we encountered before, we're still doing that, but we're more empowered now knowing what we know. And I just want to talk about that because I know a lot of you listening have encountered that. And some people just sort of say, well, that's the way it is. I'm more along the lines of saying, what can we do to change it? Because it's hard, it's rough, and I don't blame anybody who says, well, I don't really want to fight with anybody. I don't want to be negative, and I don't either. So what I want to do is talk about what this standard of care is, what our current health model is, what kind of systems that we, have to kind of navigate, but then really what is it that we do to alleviate that, to move forward from that. So always wanting to talk about how we can make things better for all of us. All right, so our current standard of care. So I suppose, a lot of people talk in the holistic space about our standard of care, our medical model, our systems in the West at least, being sort of under that lens of reactionary medicine. So what does that mean? What's reactionary medicine? Well, basically, it's when you get sick, we react to the illness after the fact. And that is okay because sometimes we get sick and we need to react. But what we really want to be able to do is respond. And even better is that we can work toward prevention. We can do things, live ways, be aware of certain things that will actually prevent the illnesses, the health challenges in the first place. So what we want to do is start flipping those ideas on its head. So instead of saying, oh, I have an infection, I need to take an antibiotic. Maybe we want to figure out where that infection came from, why our immune systems were, dampened enough to succumb to that. Or maybe, sometimes the illness, quote unquote, is actually the body doing its job. And we just need to allow that body to do its job rather than intervening sometimes. So that concept of prevention is really what is so empowering, and has been for me and my family for sure, and with clients that I work with, because if we can, and not just prevention, but also like turning it back to what happened in the first place so that we can respond appropriately. So we're not afraid of whatever we are facing, so that we understand it, so that we can prevent it from happening in the future or in the first place. And also, really focusing on maintaining health rather than this whole concept that, you hear in the holistic space of sick care, right? So we have a system of sick care. That's what people are sick when they're in the hospitals, or in those, practitioner offices. But really, I find that in many practitioner offices that I go into, because I do need help sometimes, we all do, they're more centered, their concepts and what they do, are more centered around teaching me about being aware of my body. So, a lot of the practices and the healthcare that I really ascribe to and find to be so beautifully beneficial is when I go and see my, let's say, Thai yoga massage therapist, and he teaches me how to move differently so that I prevent that, tension or pulled ligament or inflammation in a certain body that he helps me to uncover, and that I learn how to intuit or understand where it's coming from. So I find that when I go see a craniosacral therapist, and she tells me that there's a lot of nervous system disruption going on there. You need to be able to prevent that or to mitigate it, to reduce it, help to prevent in the future by paying more attention to stress reduction, right? So it's the teaching that would be, is the most beneficial, and being aware of our bodies and our responses to our environment. So again, instead of reacting, we want to respond, and we don't want to panic. And the way to do that is when we have the proper information and supports, and then an understanding of our own bodies, because we're listening, and an understanding of our children's bodies as well, and the people that we care for. So it can be I spend a lot of time, not purposefully so, but being upset, being angry at times, being frustrated with the healthcare system, because we had to advocate so fiercely for testing, for, even easy, simple things like introducing a vitamin, like vitamin D into a family member's regimen, because the doctor didn't understand the need for it, or so what I always asked from all of these healthcare professionals was to work with me, not against me. And I wasn't wanting to work against anybody else, but it's sometimes felt that way. So I see this revolution of a healthcare system happening with our own families, happening within the decisions that we make for our own families, and in our autonomy and our own agency and our own ability to make those decisions for ourselves, taking into account everyone that we trust to help supply information and uncover those solutions for ourselves. So again, what do we focus on in responsive healthcare, in preventative healthcare, in health span and longevity, right? So not lifespan. We don't want to live long and sick. We want to live long and healthy. We want longevity, not longevity. We don't want to be live long and be sick. We want to live long and feel as young as possible, because It's not pretending that we don't get old or don't, slow down at all. But youth, I actually connect youth to feelings of joy and movement and being able to use your body and the best you can. So, what do we focus on when we are trying to switch that model into a model of health care rather than sick care? So, the immune system, right? We want the immune system to be healthy because that's our natural defense against any sort of invasion, any sort of toxicity, any sort of disruption in our biochemistry. So we want the immune system working well, and we need to nurture that. And that's our first line of defense. It's not about the right medication. It's not about antibiotics. It's not about the right, arsenal in our, I wouldn't even call it toolkit. It's not our arsenal of things that we can fight with, right? Because our immune system is already doing that for us if we nurture it and if we treat our bodies right. So we'll talk about that more in detail in another episode, but that's one of our main things that we need to pay attention to is our immune system and making sure it's working well, because that will be our first line of defense, and we'll be able to deal with probably 80-90% of the things that come our way before we have to resort to any sort of other treatments. Our nervous system, for sure. Those two are very tied in together, the immune system and the nervous system. And the nervous system, is very important to nurture, to pay attention to stay in balance, because our nervous system actually is what says, okay, there's a problem, and immune system, you need to kick up or you need to settle down, right? If there's a problem, or if the nervous system says it's okay. Many other things that go on biochemically and energetically with the nervous system that we're going to cover in another episode too. But just know that those two systems in the body are the first two things that we take care of. Another thing, this is solution oriented, right? So addressing toxicities and deficiencies. Whenever I teach my trainees, we talk a lot about toxicities and deficiencies. We don't want anything in our bodies that are going to make them toxic and unable to do their jobs, or to slow us down, to pollute our tissues and blood, brain, everything. We don't want that polluting our bodies. So we want to address toxicities. And we also want to tank up on things that we don't have enough of, right? So we don't have a good diet. We have genetic propensities toward being deficient in certain things. We're not, we don't have a gut that works really well, so we can't absorb. So we want to always address deficiencies in this movement toward responsive healthcare, right? In healthcare, not sick care. So also another thing is lifestyle, such as sleep, rest, exercise, stress reduction. Those things, we're going to talk about each of them and in more detail in the upcoming episodes as well. But those are really big issues. And we think lifestyle is benign sometimes. And it's not in any way benign. It's actually, again, when I work with families, these things are the low-hanging fruit, but seem to be the most overlooked things. We want to have this pill, or we want to have someone tell us this is the magic bullet. But really, how we live, what we ingest, what we expose ourselves to are the biggest, tools we have to either making ourselves more toxic and deficient, or by making ourselves less toxic and tanked up with that nourishment, rest, and just the ability for our immune systems to work properly and our nervous systems to really mostly move and work in neutral, not in hyper state. Also addressing the emotional body, the spirit, right? Nourishing the heart. And that means of the individual, of the family, and the community. So another thing that kind of can get overlooked, and you think, well, what does that have to do with our physical being? It has everything to do with it, and we'll go into that in more detail too in another episode. But that's another, I guess, a foundational thing to keep in mind. It's foundational to our longevity and longevity, to pay attention to the heart, the emotional body, and the spirit. And then making time for connection, right? For purpose, for creativity and play and joy, no matter how old you are. There's actually a lot of research going into these individual, like they're all come into, the same sort of category, but each of these things, there's so much work and attention being paid to these things right now, especially, connection right now is actually a really big hot topic, with mental health, how important it is for us to stay connected with each other and ourselves. So how do we connect to ourselves? How do we, how are we connecting with our families? Are we, actually spending time together and being that bonded source of support for each other, and with the communities around us, with friends and peers and tribes, and connecting to nature, to our broader world, and that makes us more holistically healthy, living longer and happier. And also, connecting to our purpose. What is it that we're here to do? All these existential questions that even my children asked when they were little, right? They were little, and I get this voice across the hallway. My son would say, at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm trying to get everyone settled down, Mom, what happened before the earth was made, or before? And he would ask these questions that there's no answer to. We don't know. And so we're always looking for this bigger purpose, this bigger reason for us being here, and even how we got here in the first place. And those questions are so wonderful to explore and to acknowledge, rather than it being a source of stress. Maybe, finding purpose in the things that we do while we're here on this earth. And creativity, play, joy. Joy is the thing that I wish for when I, have a chance to wish for anything. Blow out the candle, go over the railroad track if you're superstitious, lifting your feet and wishing for joy, blowing the dandelion seeds. And those things are what really make life worth living. And so we can be in a state of stress all the time and not stopping to smell the roses, and really losing sight of being here in this moment with our families or ourselves or whatever that day is bringing for us, because there are plenty of things to think to be afraid of or to be stressed out about in our day-to-day modernized, medicalized lives. So that's my little group of solutions or things to pay attention to when we're trying to turn this model of health care, or I guess reactionary sick care, into a standard of care that is holistic. And one more thing I wanted to mention too is demedicalizing health. And what do I mean by medicalized health? Well, that's when we kind of see everything in our health or health challenges as being medicalized. Like they are, reason to have an medical emergency, go into the hospitals, go see the doctor, go and get some kind of medical treatment for. And many, many things it's not necessary to do that for, right? So we medicalize aging. We see that as a pathology. We medicalize, childbirth. We see that as something that's like a medical emergency. If you watch any movie, television show, it's become like sort of the joke that they're rushing the woman to the hospital when she's having the baby. And yes, it's a very exciting time, but is it a medical emergency? Right? Is it a medical emergency? I'm thinking that, we've had babies from the dawn of time, the dawn of, I wouldn't say time, the dawn of, human existence, let's say, and also any sort of animal that reproduces in this way. We have that, and that it's not new. It is a natural process. Aging is a natural process as long as we are aging well and taking care of ourselves. It's not a descension into dementia. It's not a descension into, more and more medications as you get older, adding those to the list because of this ache and pain and that, malfunction. Even, I guess hormones, right? Or so girls' menses and stuff like that. These are not medical emergencies. These are natural processes of the body. So they're natural things. They become easy when we set ourselves up for success by addressing all of the things I've been talking about today. So I really think that looking into how we see our health, how we respond to our health, really affects how we actually are, our health of our individual selves and of our families and communities. So that's all I wanted to talk about today, and just introduce that topic for us because it's going to set the stage for a lot of things that are going to be coming down the pike. And again, as you know, this show is all about holistic health, and holism really just means addressing all of us, all of our aspects of ourselves, all aspects of health. And when we do that, it's a more whole, I'm going to use the word whole again, state of health that we can possibly achieve. So that is my wish for you. So to end the show, as I'm always going to end the show, this podcast is sponsored by the Healthy Family Formula, which essentially means that we share our information for free. All we ask is that before you move on to the next 100 things on your to-do list for today, take what you learn, and instead of waiting until Monday, January 1st, or any other arbitrary date in the future, act on it now. Buy that new food, start that new routine, shift into that healthier habit. The little steps steadily move you past the miles you leave behind you. For more information about anything related to family health, do pick up my book and check out our newsletter, blog, individual and group coaching programs, and practitioner training program at healthyfamilyformula.com. And you can also like our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/healthyfamilyformula. Again, thank you for listening, as it was a pleasure to spend this time with you today. May you and your family be well. Please note that Family Health Revolution podcast is not a source for diagnosis or medical treatment, but is the opinion of the host. This podcast is intended to empower people with information so they can make the best health decisions for themselves. It is up to each person to listen to their inner wisdom, consider the information they deem to be accurate and applicable to their individual situation, and consult with their trusted healthcare providers, if they so choose, when making any decisions regarding their own health or the health of their loved ones. Each person's health is their own responsibility.